I'll disable his mic and camera.
Okay, thank you. Oh, there's Councilman Walton. Hello.
Recording started.
Thank you. Great. Well, good afternoon to the SEC Chair, Finance Committee members, the SEC team, and members of the public joining us today. I'd like to call the February meeting of the Finance Committee to order. It is 2:02 p.m. And I'll begin by calling the roll. Councilman Pelka.
Good afternoon. I'm here, Madam Chair.
Chairman Robinson.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Here.
Okay. Councilman Shirley. Councilman Walton.
Present.
And I am here. We have a quorum. Before we get started, I wanted to just revisit a conversation that took place when we convened in January. During that meeting, there were questions regarding the funds that have been collected from the fees from the recreational cannabis program. The monies collected for application and licenses were kept in the social equity and innovation account. And that account terminates at the end of the fiscal year and then will be transferred to the Social Equity and Innovation Fund, which is a non-lapsing fund and will be held in the Office of the Treasurer. As of February 9th, the Social Equity and Innovation account has $42 million in it. And I'm thankful to Councilman Pelka for gathering that information. Our first item on the agenda is the approval of the January meeting minutes. And if I can have a motion to approve them.
So moved, Mark.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great, thank you. The next item on the agenda is the presentation of the January financial statement. We are joined by Jennifer Stevens, the SEC's Associate Accountant. So I'll turn it over to her to present. Jennifer, are you in a good place to do that?
Sure.
Awesome, thank you so much.
So we had a few expenditures for January, starting with, should I share my screen?
Sure.
Okay, let's see.
Document was also in the meeting materials, but I think it would be helpful for you to have it, show it.
Okay. So we have this column here in column I, and what we had spent for the month. The salary was $49,113.25. That's for our 5 employees we have currently, our staff, and 2 paychecks in January. The next row is the fringe tied to those salaries that was paid. We'll go down to the consultant, CohnReznick LLP number 1. I call it number 1. Those are the applications, review, and recommendations. So we had paid 2 invoices for $34,424.86. That was received for work done through December. The next one is the CohnReznick number 2, which is the workforce development plans review recommendations. We had paid the $6,409.93. That is through December billing. We go down, we received our first invoice from Oaksterdam University, and it is for the work on the contract they did through December 31st in the amount of the $155,841. We go down a couple more expenditures. Our subscriptions. So for this month, we normally have just Westlaw, every month steady $397.80. But in this month, we did pay our yearly Zoom subscription for year 2. And that's the total of them 2 together. So in this month, the total was the $291, $329.54. And hopefully that explains. And if there's any questions, please let me know.
Sure. Any questions from the committee? Councilman Walton.
Yeah, I do. Excuse, and thanks for the update. But if you could just explain why we paid CohnReznick in that manner.
Why we displayed it in this manner? I wanted
Why we
to-
pay them in that manner?
Oh, so as their work is done and their applications and their workforce development plans are recommended and approved and voted upon, they will bill us.
So I guess
So-
I'm looking for explanation of why we, like, we're not just paying them a flat rate, or, so how are we paying them?
We're
Per-
paying them per hour for the work that they're doing that's in the scope of work for each agreement. So it does vary depending on how many plans and how long it took for each plan and each application.
Okay. All right,
Yeah, and I
thank
think
you.
there were three, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jennifer, we had 3 staff members at different hourly rate levels. So there was Jeff, Serona, and Ray.
Mhm.
So to the extent that they were, and then there's also the other rest of the team that does the review, but the ones who present to us. So, I think if you look for like September 30th, there's this huge chunk of change because there was such a significant volume of applications that had to be reviewed and recommended for approval. And then they sort of, I guess, leveled off a little bit. Is that
Exactly.
helpful?
And we have their rates negotiated in each agreement at a discount. And I always verify to make sure we're staying on target with those rates.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions from the committee?
This is Mark, just,
Hi, Councilman Pelka.
thank you. Thank you. I, just confirming my understanding. So we reduced the, since the last, balance sheet came out, we reduced the, budgeted amount for Camelo Communication, and then did we move all of the difference into the SEC marketing, branding, communication line, or did the funds get moved elsewhere? I just is hoping to better understand the movement that occurred from apparently out of Camelo and into SEC marketing and perhaps other lines in the budget.
Yes, that's what we did for now. We
Okay,
had just added them here to this line. So we have the money holding if we're going to get a new contract or whatever we need to use it for, hopefully soon. It's there, it's available.
okay, makes sense. And I realize I noticed the 2 lines that stood out to me based on where we are in the fiscal year and what we want to spend is the community reinvestment program and workforce development and the accelerator program, Oaksterdam University Reset. So this question may be better posed to Ginny Ray. Is the accelerator program, is the kind of drawdown of that line expected to increase now that we are contracting with Oaksterdam and that work is underway? Just was wondering what the remaining months of the fiscal year will look like for expenditure of that line on the accelerator program.
Yeah, so we just received our second invoice yesterday from Oaksterdam University for $111,158. They will
Okay.
now start to draw down the program. There was a lot of work done to prep for the program in fiscal 22, I'm sorry, in December of
Okay.
22, and the program just got started with the full program in January. So each month they will invoice us and draw down. And we will spend that whole the balance will be spent by September.
Oh, great. Okay, great. Finally, on the community reinvestment, I know that the IMRP report was recently received, and I know that the SEC staff are doing their due diligence to review and provide input on that report, and hopefully that will help us. I know the reinvestment subcommittee held its first meeting last week. Do we feel is sort of the focus for reinvestment gonna focused on spending down as much of that as possible in the remaining months? Is there any perspective you could share about progress on spending down that 6 million, since that's the biggest kind of portion remaining? And I know we have a lot of ambitious goals as a council for reinvesting in this fiscal year and the fiscal years to come.
Yeah, so the reinvestment committee met again today, earlier, this morning at 10 a.m. and we have some next steps, and we are putting together a timeline for trying to work, for actually a timeline and a plan to move as much of the 6.1 million as we can by the end of the fiscal year. So we are going to be, the committee has decided that it would like to look at existing programs that may need some enhancement,
Okay,
and also involving itself in community conversations to find out, the needs of the community and what various members of the community want. So we're putting together the plan for community conversations, for outreach, and for looking at looking at programs that are in existence. Maybe other state agencies are doing them. They don't want to reinvent the wheel.
Right.
And we know that there's never, ever enough money to go around to help people that are in need and those people that have been impacted. So we, hopefully by mid-March, we will have a good handle on some conversations and follow up with agencies and other programs that are providing services.
Makes a lot of sense to me. Thank you so much for that update. It's good to know that the reinvestment subcommittee met again this morning, and thank you for bringing that hot off the presses update to this meeting. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I have Kevin Walter, I have a question. January, thanks for sharing that. So I guess my question would be, has the reinvestment committee, have you had that conversation with the chair of the outreach committee? Because I know that we met, and we, that's one of the things that I know we were supposed to meet together to really push forward these community conversations.
Just really quickly, that's the next item on our agenda. Actually, it's related to your question, but anyway, by all means, feel free to.
I can wait. So either way.
Okay.
Yeah,
Why don't we make it part of the discussion?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. And sorry for the informality, Director Clay. So there are no other questions. Perfect segue to what's next on the agenda, which is a discussion on allocation of resources for community conversations and outreach. As Director Clay mentioned, the council recently formed a reinvestment committee to determine the plan and approach for disseminating funds to disproportionately impacted areas. And as she said, the committee met this morning, and as a follow-up, committee chair Ojala Name provided a summary of the roles and responsibilities of that committee and the outreach committee. So just really quickly, for the reinvestment committee, they're providing the criteria and parameters for investment, the guidelines for evaluation of proposals, and making investment recommendations to the council. The outreach committee, as it pertains to reinvestment, will be selecting a third party to run community conversations and providing reinvestment committee output of those conversations. Now, outreach committee chair Sabira Gordon, to your point, Councilman Walton, recently reached out to me to make a request for sort of what is the ask format for funding to facilitate those responsibilities, specifically to host community conversations. So as we just heard, the SEC, or just saw, the SEC has both $6.1 million for reinvestment and about $735,000 for communications and marketing. So what I'd like the committee to discuss, and of course, Director Clay, provide context as you see fit, is Chair Gordon's request, given those available resources and the fact that we have about 3 months to expend those resources. So I will stop there and open it up for questions, comments, context.
So I can just add that I did have a initial conversation with Chairwoman Gordon about outreach and communication, and it was agreed that we would hear the next meeting of the reinvestment committee. So we have those next steps. She was not at that meeting today, but I will be reaching out to her, and we will begin the work as outlined in the next steps from Chairwoman Naeem.
Okay. All right. So based on that, because I talked to her just prior to this meeting, and she was asking about the format to request funds. So I'm just trying to, I guess, kind of balance what what I'm hearing based on what she asked and whether or not there needs to be a recommendation from this committee with regards to, you know, resource allocation for the outreach committee.
Well, I mean, I think this committee could make a recommendation, but those funds are already in our operating budget. So we can spend those as the council sees fit. So if there is a budget, if there's some ideas, which I had planned to reach out to Chairwoman Gordon and again after today's meeting to kind of give her an update. And even we have to narrow down several things. So it's the communities in which we're going to have these conversations. How deep into the community are we going to go? Are we going to go more high level to talk with service agencies? Or are we going into the community to talk to the actual residents? And so that will determine a different level of funding based on how we decide to move forward.
Okay.
But the
Councilman
funds are
Wilson?
in place. We have money. We can spend that money.
Councilman
Yeah.
Walton?
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Director Clay. So if I may recall, maybe I don't know if we're saying the same thing, but I know the specific question was will those funds be allocated? Does there need to be an RFP process? And because we were concerned that give the time frame that there might not be enough time to do that. So I guess we're looking for specifically how we going to select how we allocate those funds to facilitate those meetings.
So I believe today in the reinvestment committee meeting, it was determined that we would look for programs that are already in existence, having an impact that may need some enhancement. And so that would be one way of funding programs like, a grandparents program, a fatherhood initiative. So we would be reaching out to, I believe, various state agencies that are already funding these types of programs and using that as one method of either providing more funding directly to those organizations or to those state agencies, but we don't know that just yet. But so the first step is to enhance existing programs that need extra dollars that are already having an impact.
So
I'm sorry.
sorry, because I do appreciate that. So I would just suggest, like, personally speaking, right, like here in New Haven, when we're looking to make those decisions, I would hope to have the opportunity to share in those decision makings, because we have a kind of understanding of who does the real work and who can get the information that we're looking for to the people. Because my kind of hesitancy is that we fall into the pattern of going back to the same kind of people that we know or we know and they're connected to whomever, right? Because here specifically in Fairhaven, where there's an open air drug market right down the street, I know the people who can directly speak to what needs to be done in this area. So I would hope we have the opportunity to have the input in who we're choosing and who we're working with.
Yes.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Walton, for that. And I definitely appreciate that. And just to kind of, I guess, maybe close the loop, if possible. So Chair Gordon had indicated that there were going to be sort of parallel tracks, right? One of the tracks was going to be around supporting organizations that are existing, but then at the same time, there would be these conversations that were held in the community so that we weren't waiting for the context or the feedback from those conversations to make distributions, but that we were getting some money out the door now, but then we were also honoring our promise to the members of this community or these communities that we would hear them and listen to them while making these determinations going forward. So I think the question is, so we have the sort of plan for how we're going to deal with the existing organizations, but the outreach committee and Chair Gordon is looking specifically for resources in order to host these community conversations. And so that was the request as I understood it. So I don't know, and to your point, Director Clay, I think that, having a budget is important, right? And sort of I don't want us to let the quest for perfection be the enemy of the good, right? I mean, I think Councilman Walton makes a really strong case for the fact that, you know, I think those of us who live in these areas don't have to look too far out our windows or walk too far from where we live to see the impact and know the people that can inform these conversations. So I say all that to say, can we maybe leverage the knowledge of our council members to give us some suggestions around where we might hold these conversations, at least as a first round?
Absolutely. Right. 100%.
So Councilman Walton, I don't know if you had another question, only because your hand was still up.
Oh, no, I'm, 5 years later, I'm still not able to use this. I apologize.
Not that long. I know it feels like that long. Chair Robertson.
I'm so glad that Councilman Walton raised that point, as I did in the reinvestment committee, because he's absolutely right. It's like the whole goal is to reach out. We kind of know some of the geographic locations. We know some of the organizations, and to your point, we could leverage them also to do, to call information to see kind of what is needed for the folks that we do know. But I think in the spirit of social equity, there's a large community that we haven't heard from that we're trying to find. And I think it's incumbent upon us to figure out some way, whether it is going out or asking organizations to create some kind of format to ask where the need is. And then the other piece of it is the immediacy. So, not only do we have this tranche of money, but there's an immediate need to get it out. So I think that's the other part of it too. And my vision is, and goal is always to try to get it right. So I'm hoping that the timeline, the speed, and the expediency of understanding that, it's not only just about this money sitting in a till, but it's about the need and getting it out immediately. So that's just kind of my addition.
Okay. Well, as far as next steps, I'm wondering if, I don't know if this committee wants to make a recommendation as far as, making funds available upon development of a budget from the outreach committee, and sort of a site location type of first round. I mean, do we want to do, the big cities first, as in terms of community conversations, and have that be a starting place, and then we can sort of get more granular as we go on. But does this committee want to make a recommendation to the full council to provide resources for the outreach committee to sort of get this thing moving?
I would also say yes, and also with the geographic look. Mm-hmm. So not only just large cities, I mean, as we, even from a DCD perspective, looking at geography just to make sure that, I mean, Connecticut's not a large state, but even if we divide it up into Western, Central, and Eastern in that look, and looking at the organizations to make sure that we have got an even disbursement of at least messaging, and letting, folks know that we're looking to hear you.
Okay. That sounds good to me. So am I hearing yes? And if so, Councilman Pelka.
I'll just invite real quick. So so the outreach committee, are they developing a plan? Are they we don't have any a contractor or vendor to, who's doing the lead to convene? Is it falling to the outreach committee, or?
That was my understanding, was that was the request. And so, okay. I mean, so we can do one of two things. We can either sort of report out that we've had this conversation, that there were still some questions for the outreach committee to sort of react or respond to without a recommendation, or we could make a recommendation that the resources would be made available for the outreach committee to sort of determine how to house these community conversations upon submission of a budget and plan.
Yep.
So I'm, I leave it to the greater minds on this committee to determine their pleasure.
Is there any remaining funding in the IMRP budget for conversations to be convened only because they did that work with the Police Accountability and Transparency Task Force? Or they exhausted the kind of the work in the contract? Just was wondering if I don't know actually. I feel like I'm speaking from a place of lack of knowledge because I don't know what the outreach committee has assembled. So I'll have to listen carefully next Tuesday's full SEC meeting. I know that we're facing some pressures, right? We want to spend as much of the 6 million by the end of the fiscal year. We want to jumpstart our community outreach engagement, and it seems like a very fraught exercise to undertake because it's qualitative. It's despite being a small, geographically compact state, it's got a lot of ground to cover, and it just seems that it's going to be an evolving enterprise, right? We can't hit every community we can't perform outreach to every community at the same time. It's going to have to unfold. And luckily we have, future years of work of reinvestment. So I feel like I'm perhaps asking questions that the outreach committee is better positioned to ask. And luckily we have a meeting on Tuesday anyways.
Yeah.
If I may, Madam Chair. So Councilman Pelka, I think you make excellent point. I think, and that was the concern because of the crunch, right? The time crunch. And just been given this information, this at least for me being on the committee, maybe a month, maybe 2, right? But I think to Chairwoman's point, she's making some good points about how we move, because I think we need to move. And again, I go back to that original question of, did it need to be an RFP? It doesn't seem to need to be an RFP. So I know our initial thought was that we would just convene folk and, connect with people in the community and, do what you do with community meetings. But I just wanted to share with the group. And so just based on my experience here in this community, right? And I'm not making any assumptions that we'll be in New Haven, but I do want to know one of the biggest. So 2 of the things are happening on the ground. People are still not sure about what we're doing as a council, because I still hear people saying, well, how come this person doesn't have a license? I'm not necessarily understanding there's a whole process and things there. So there's still a little lack of awareness, but also a lack of trust, right? Mm-hmm. I do also know that in this community, nothing moves and nothing gets support without community input. I have seen $1 million deals taken off the table or held up because the alder or some concerned folks in that neighborhood, there wasn't a community meeting. So I just want to save us some headache and kind of saying, here's the meeting, here's the input, here's what we're doing, and then saying we're here trying to work with you. But I just want to reiterate that there is this lack of trust because some folks just thought that people who may have been to prison or who are impacted should just walk up and get a license, right? Yeah. And that's still kind of this thing that's out there. So I'm also saying that I think having these community meetings will go a long way in doing some PR work as well.
I think that's an excellent point, Councilman Walton, and I thank you for raising that. And while I definitely appreciate all the thoughtfulness that is going into this, I also don't think this is rocket science, right? Councilman Walton, you are in New Haven. I've done some work in New Haven. I think about CONCAT as a place where folks could come and have those conversations. I live in Hartford. I think about the Artist Collective as a place where folks could come and have that conversation. I don't think we need to, especially because time is not on our side, and especially because we have lost so much time where we didn't have the requisite conversations with the community along this path, to your point about people still having questions around the process. So we can try and do it perfectly and touch every place, or we can rely on the expertise and the knowledge of the community relationships that the members of the council have, and just put some things in place. And that's my suggestion.
Agreed.
Okay.
I agree too. Thank you for spending a little bit of additional time to help me catch up. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
And I do think the Tuesday meeting will be at helpful. I think that will be good to have all the subcommittees. A lot's happened in the last month.
For sure. So I'm going to return to my question. Is the will of this committee to make a recommendation to the full council that resources be provided to the outreach committee upon submission of a budget and a plan?
I could agree to that,
Okay.
Madam Chair.
Will you move that as a motion?
Well, yes, I can, and I move that this committee given a budget, that the outreach committee put together a plan to host community meetings.
I will second that. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? All righty. So we've covered both 4 and 5. Is there any other business? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Have a second.
Second.
Awesome. All in favor?
Aye.
Jennifer, Jenny, thank you so much to the
you.
staff that's hiding behind the screens. Jennifer Kumla.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
The community members for joining us. Enjoy the
Thank
rest
you.
of
Have
your
a good one, everyone.
Thank
You
you.
too.
Enjoy the snow.
All right.
Yeah.
Bye.